Welcome, everyone, to our special Bookaccino Live Winter Preview Evening program. I'm Carol Fitzgerald. I'm looking forward to being your host this evening, and I want to introduce Tom Donadio, our amazing editorial director, who worked with me, and we worked together to pull together this entire presentation of books that we see that we think you want to read. They're coming out between now and March 18th. Because as Tom said, March 18th is the last Tuesday before spring. So that's our cutoff date. Correct, Tom?
Absolutely. So I want to give you the complete overview of winter. So March 18th is the cutoff point. So we have a tremendous lineup of titles in various genres, and there's a lot coming out for
Yeah.
sure this winter. It's going to be a busy winter.
And
It already has been.
we had a lot of fun pulling this together. And I want to thank Francesca Smith, who's not around tonight, who helped with all the leave behind information that you got, the survey that we're going to be running at the end, and all kinds of information that I think you'll want to have about these books. So, with no further ado, let's get started. I'm going to be flashing through 60 titles tonight. So, this is going to be a little test for me of how quickly I can go and still keep you all involved. Okay. So we're going to start out with The Heart of Winter by Jonathan Evison. It's already out. And here's what it's about. Abe Winter and Ruth Ronneke are never meant to be together, at least if you ask Ruth. Yet their catastrophic blind date in college evolved into, get this, a 70-year marriage and a life on a farm in Bainbridge Island with their hens and beloved Labrador Megs. Through the years, the Winters have fallen in and out of lockstep, and from their haunting losses and guarded secrets, a dependable partnership has been forged. But when Ruth Loose Tooth turns out to be something far more malicious, the beautiful, reliable life they've created together comes to a crisis. As Ruth struggles with her crumbling independence, Abe must learn how to take care of her while their three children question their ability to look after each other and trying to say, like, oh, can you really be, doing this? It's they're going to be doing that, and once again, the couple has to reconfigure how they can be there for each other. So it just sounds like a beautiful story about a long marriage and how it's holding through, like, as the years go on. Next, we've got Homeseeking, and Homeseeking comes to us from Carissa Chen, and this is a January Good Morning America Book Club pick. So what have we got? Haiwan is buying bananas at the 99 Ranch Market in Los Angeles when he looks up and sees sushi, his sushi, for the first time in 60 years. To recently widowed Haiwan, it feels like a second chance, but sushi has only survived by refusing to look back. Sushi was 7 when she first met Haiwan in their Shanghai neighborhood, drawn by the sound of his violin. Their childhood friendship blossomed into soul-deep love, but when Haiwen secretly enlisted in the Nationalist Army in 1947 to save his brother from the draft, she was left with just his violin and a note that said, "Forgive me." Homeseeking follows the separated lovers through 6 decades of tumultuous Chinese history. So there we've got Homeseeking. Next up, we've got The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus by Emma Knight, which is both January's Barnes& and Noble selection as well as the Read with Jenna book club pick. That's a lot of eyes on this book. Arriving at the University of Edinburgh for her first term, Penn knows that her divorced parents back in Canada are hiding something from her. She believes she'll find the answer here in Scotland, where an old friend of her father's, now a famous writer known as Lord Lennox, lives. When she is invited to spend the weekend at Lord Lennox's centuries-old estate with his enveloping, fascinating family, Penn begins to unravel her parents' secret, just as she's falling in love for the first time. As Penn experiences the sharp shock of adulthood, she comes to rely on herself for the first time in her life. So there we've got The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus. Next, from Lisa Genova, we've got More or Less Maddie, which is one of my book reporter bets on selections. I absolutely love this book. And I interviewed Lisa. My interview with her is just up. So what do we have here? And you may remember Lisa as the author of Still Alice. Maddie Banks is just like every other stressed out freshman at NYU, Between schoolwork, exams, navigating life in the city, and a recent breakup, it's normal to be feeling overwhelmed. It doesn't help that she's always felt like the odd one out in her picture-perfect Connecticut family. But Maddie's latest low is devastatingly low, and she goes on an antidepressant. She begins to feel good, dazzlingly good, in fact, and soon spirals high into a wild and terrifying mania that culminates in a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. As she struggles to find her way in this new reality, navigating the complex effects that bipolar has on her identity, her relationships, and her life dreams, Maddie will have to figure out how to manage being both too much and not enough. And it was interesting. Lisa said when she was out talking about her last book, people said, "What are you writing next?" And she said, "I'm writing a book, and it's all going to be about bipolar disorder." And people stopped her on the signing line to tell her story after story about their family or friends and how this disorder has affected their families. So, next up, we've got Playworld, a novel by Adam Ross. That's also out now. Griffin Hurt is in over his head between his role as Peter Proton on the hit show The Nuclear Family and the pressures of high school at New York's elite Boyd Prep, along with the increasingly compromising demands of his wrestling coach. He's teetering on the brink of collapse. And then came Naomi Shaw, 22 years Griffin's senior. Unwilling to lay his burdens on his shrink, whom he shares with his father, mother, and younger brother, Orrin, Griffin soon finds himself in the back of Naomi's Mercedes sedan again and again, confessing all to the one person who might do him the most harm. So there we've got Playworld. Next, we've got The Three Lives of Kate Kay, which is also on sale now, and it is Reese's Book Club pick and also the Target Book Club pick for January. Kate Kay knows how to craft a story. As the creator of a best-selling book trilogy that struck box office gold as a film series, she's one of the most successful authors of her generation. The thing is, Kate Kay doesn't really exist. She never attended author events or granted any interviews. Her real identity has been a closely guarded secret until now. As a young adult, she and her best friend Amanda dreamed of escaping their difficult homes and moving to California to become movie stars. But the day before their grand adventure, a tragedy shattered their dreams, and Kate has been on the run ever since, taking on different names and charting a new future. But after a shocking revelation, Kate understands that returning home is the only way she'll be a whole person again. There we got The Three Lives of Kate Kay that doesn't really exist. Next, we've got What Happens to the McCraes by Tracy Lang. It's a Bookreporter Bets on selection. I really love Tracy's books. I've read two in the past, and she just does a really great job of talking about family. And I had a fabulous time talking to her today and interviewing her for an interview that will go up later this week. So here's what we've got. When Kyle McCrae gets word that his father has suffered a debilitating stroke, he returns to his hometown of Potsdam, New York, where he doesn't expect a warm welcome. He left suddenly 2.5 years ago, abandoning people who depended on him. His father, his employees, his friends, not to mention Casey, his wife of 16 years, and a beloved teacher in town. He plans to lie low, help his father recuperate until he can leave again. And the longer he's home, the more that Kyle understands the impact his departure has had on the people left behind. When he's presented with an opportunity for redemption as the coach of the floundering middle school hockey team, he begins to find compassion in unexpected places. He even considers staying in Potsdam, but that's only possible if he and Casey can come to some kind of peace with each other. Just brilliantly done. I love the whole way the whole story unfolds of what happened to the McCraes through the years. Really, really well done. Next, we've got Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. The last that I checked, I think this book has sold this week over 500,000 copies. Yes, this is a book that you want to know about to be in the know. It's a continuation of the Empyrean series following Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I'm sure you've seen some people reading those books. So let's see what's happening. After nearly 18 months as Bagsworth War College, Violet knows there's no more time for lessons, no more time for uncertainty, because the battle has truly begun. And with enemies closing in from outside their walls and within their ranks, it's impossible to know who to trust. Now Violet must journey beyond the failing Aretian wards to seek allies from unfamiliar lands to stand with Navarre. The trip will test every bit of her wit, luck, and strength, but she will do anything to save what she loves. And ready for this, people? Her dragons, her family, her home, and him. Even if it means keeping a secret so big it could destroy everything. They need an army. They need power. They need magic. And the one thing that only Violet can find, the truth. But a storm is coming, and not everybody can survive its wrath. So there we've got Onyx Storm. Oops, there, Onyx Storm. Next, we've got Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. It is coming out on January 28th. I have been listening to this, and the narration is completely terrific. You probably recognize her as the author of Black Cake, which came out a couple of years ago and was a bestseller. This is January's top library reads pick, once again coming on January 28th. When 10-year-old Ebby Freeman heard the gunshot, time stopped. When she saw her brother Baz lying on the floor, surrounded by the shattered pieces of a centuries-old jar, life as Ebby knew it shattered as well. Crime was never solved, and became the Freemans were the only family of the only one of the only black families in a particularly well-to-do enclave of New England. The case had an enduring voyeuristic pull to the public. When Ebby's high-profile romance falls apart without any explanation, she flees to France, only to have her past follow her there. And as she tries to process what happens, she begins to think about the other loss her family suffered on that day 18 years ago. The stoneware jar that had been in their family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. The book is terrific. I'm hoping Charmaine is coming to the States next week, and I'm hoping to get an interview with her. She's got a really packed schedule, and it's just so well done. And I feel like I'm peeling the story apart and trying to figure out what happened with the stoneware jar. And I'm close to the end, and it's still unraveling for me. Next, we've got Tartufo from Kira Jane Buxton, which is coming from Grand Central Publishing, also on the 28th. And if any of these titles see Brooks, book group speed dating in the bottom, what it means is during our book group speed dating promotion or presentation, these books were featured. So we want you to know that they would be really big books for book clubs. So, after nearly losing the election to a geriatric donkey, the newly installed Mayor Delizio Mucciucci can't help but feel like the sun has finally set on the rural Italian village of Lazzarini Boscarino. That is all that's left is Bar Celebritia, a rustic establishment where weary locals gather to quibble over decades-long disputes, submit their poor stomachs to bartender Giuseppe Zini's volcanic espresso, and wonder what will become of the place where together they've spent their entire lives. Little do the villagers know that the local truffle hunter, Giovanni Scarpazza, has just happened upon something that could change everything. A truffle, un tartufo, that is, sits beneath the soil with the power to be either the greatest gift or the foulest curse the village has ever seen. You may never look at a truffle again the same way after this. And Shelby Van Pelt said, I savored every page of this book. Next, we've got Too Soon by Betty Shermay. 35-year-old Arabella, a New York theater director whose dating and career prospects are drying up, is offered an opportunity to direct a risque cross-dressing interpretation of a Shakespearean classic, which might garner international attention in the West Bank. Her mother, Naya, and her grandmother, Zoya, hatch a plot to match her with Aziz, a Palestinian-American doctor volunteering in Gaza. Arabella agrees to meet Aziz since her growing feelings for Yoav, a celebrated Israeli-American theater designer, seem destined for disaster. Upon learning that one of them is living on borrowed time, the three women fight to live, make art, and love on their own terms. I love that line. Next, we've got A 40-Year Kiss from Nicholas Butler. It's coming on February 4th. It's part of our winter reading promotion where we have contests that happen for 24 hours. You have 24 hours to jump on and be able to win a book. And this will be happening, let's just say, around February 4th. Charlie and Vivian parted ways after just 4 years of marriage. Too many problems, too many struggles, even though the love didn't quite die. Charlie returns to Wisconsin 40 years later. He's not sure what he'll find, but he's sure of one thing. He must try to reconnect with Vivian to pick up the broken pieces of their past. But 40 years is a long time. It's 40 years of other relationships, 40 years of building new lives, and 40 years of long held regrets, mistakes, and painful secrets. And it's also got a 40-year kiss. So let's see what happens with this one. Next, we've got The Snowbirds from Christina Clancy. And this is coming on February 4th as well. A couple for 30 years, Kim and Grant's separate but together partnership is running up against the realities of late middle age. Grant's mother has died, the college where he taught philosophy was shuttered, and their twin girls are grown and gone. Escaping the bitter cold of a Midwestern winter for the hot desert sun of Palm Springs seems to be a good solution as any to the more intractable problems they face. When they arrive at Le Desert, a quirky condo community, Kim immediately embraces the opportunity to make new friends and explore a more adventurous side of her personality. Meanwhile, Grant struggles to find his footing in this unfamiliar landscape. When Grant goes missing on a hike in the Palm Springs Mountains, Kim is forced to consider two terrifying outcomes. Either Grant is truly lost, or this time he has really left her. So there we've got The Snowbirds. We've got This Is a Love Story from Jessica Soffer. This is coming on February 4th as well. For 50 years, Abe and Jane have been coming to Central Park, starry-eyed young lovers, as frustrated and exhausted parents, as artists watching their careers take flight. They come alone when they needed to get away from each other and together when they had something important to discuss. The park has been their witness for half a century of love, until now. Jane is dying and Abe is recounting their life together as a way of keeping them going. The parts they knew, their courtship and early marriage, their blossoming creative lives, and the parts they didn't always want to know. The determined young student of Abe's looking for a love story of her own, and their son Max, who believes his mother chose art over parenthood and who has avoided love and intimacy at all costs. So there we've got This Is a Love Story with the beautiful backdrop of the park behind the words love story. Next, we've got 3 Days in June by Ann Tyler coming on February 11th. Gail Baines is having a bad day. To start, she lost her job or quits, depending on who you ask. Tomorrow, her daughter Debbie is getting married, and she hasn't even been invited to the spa day organized by the mother of the groom. And then Gail's ex-husband, Max, arrives unannounced on her doorstep carrying a cat without a place to stay and without even a suit. But the true crisis lands when Debbie shares with her parents a secret that she's just learned about her husband-to-be. This will not only throw the wedding into question, but also stir up Gail and Max's past. So we've got 3 Days in June, and this is by the Pulitzer Prize winning author of A Spool of Blue Thread, and it just sounds like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be the wedding day anybody planned. Next, we've got Waiting for the Long Night by Amanda Peters, and many of you are going to recognize her name as the best-selling author of The Berry Pickers. She was a guest for an event that we did in the fall, and boy, we have just had so many views on that video afterwards, besides the huge crowd that was there that night. This is her debut collection of short fiction, where she melds traditional storytelling with beautiful spare prose, describe the dignity of the traditional way of life, the humiliations of systemic racism, and the resilient power to endure. A young man returns from residential school only to realize he can no longer communicate with his own parents. A grieving mother finds purpose and healing on the front lines as a water protector. And a nervous child dances in her first native dance. The collection also includes the Indigenous Voices award-winning and title story, Waiting for the Long Night Moon. Sometimes sad, sometimes disturbing, but always redemptive, these stories will remind you that where there is grief, there's also joy. Where there's trauma, there's resilience. Most importantly, there's power. Next, from Jojo Moyes, we've got We All Live Here. It's coming on February 11th. Lila Kennedy has a lot on her plate. She's got a broken marriage, two wayward daughters, a house that's falling apart, an elderly stepfather who seems to have quietly moved in. Her career is in free fall, and her love life is, well, complicated. So when Lila's real dad, the man she's barely seen since he ran off to Hollywood 35 years ago, suddenly appears on her doorstep, it feels like the final straw. But it turns out that even the family you thought you never could forgive might have something to teach you about love. and what actually it means to be family. You notice in this presentation, we've got a lot of people that were away, come back, long marriages. We got some themes going here, some themes of this winter reading presentation. Next, we've got We Would Never by Tova Miras. And I had the opportunity to have lunch with her at a publisher lunch a couple of months ago. And it was just so interesting to hear the background for the story. No one appears more surprised than Haley Galeman when she comes under suspicion for the murder of her soon-to-be ex-husband, Jonah. Haley, nicknamed Sunshine by her mother for her bright outlook and ever-present smile, has always tried to do what's expected of her and was regarded as the family peacemaker. But as anyone, including Haley, who she always seemed to be, the months leading up to Jonah's death have been fraught, including a bitter separation, a messy custody battle over their young daughter Maya. When Haley files a motion to relocate to Florida so she can be near her family, Jonah retaliates, and the divorce begins to spiral dangerously out of control. So we've got here, we would never, but what we never do. Next, we've got Show Don't Tell by Curtis Sittenfeld. It's coming on February 25th. You know her as the author of Prep. In her second story collection, Curtis shows us why she's as beloved for her short fiction as she is for her novels. In these dazzling stories, she conjures up characters so real they seem like old friends, laying bare the moments when their long-held beliefs are overturned. In Patron Saint of Middle Age, a woman visits two friends she hasn't seen since her divorce. In A for Alone, a married artist embarks on a creative project intended to disprove the so-called Mike Pence rule, which suggests that women and men can't spend time alone together without lusting after each other. And in Lost But Not Forgotten, Sittenfeld gives readers of her novel Prep a window into the world of her beloved character, Lee Flora, decades later, when Lee attends an alumni reunion at her boarding school. I think it's just worth it to buy just for that chapter to see where you are now. Next, we've got Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall coming on March 4th. Beth and her gentle, kind husband Frank are happily married, though a relationship relies on the past staying buried. But when Beth's brother-in-law shoots a dog going after their sheep, Beth doesn't realize that the gunshot will alter the course of their lives. For the dog belonged to none other than Gabriel Wolfe, the man Beth loved as a teenager, the man who broke her heart years ago. Gabriel's returned to the village with his young son Leo, a boy who reminds Beth very much of her own son, who died in a tragic accident. As Beth is pulled back into Gabriel's life, tensions around the village rise, and dangerous secrets and jealousies from the past resurface, this time with deadly consequences. Beth is forced to make a choice between the woman she once was and the woman she has become. There you've got Broken Country. Next, we've got We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwell Brown. Ask anyone non-Northern, and they will only know Donnie as the punchline of a joke or a place they change trains once on the way to London. And Tom said to me, no, that's not typos. So Tom Donadio was very clear with me, just read it like that. So there you go, folks. But Doncaster is also the home of Raish, Shaz, and Kel, Bezies since childhood, and Donnie lasts through and through. Never mind that Rash is skeptical of Shaz's bolder plots, or that Shaz, who comes from the rougher edge of town, feels left behind when the others begin plotting a course to uni, or that Kel sometimes feels split in two, trying to keep the peace. The girls are inseparable, and their friendships are indestructible as they are. But as they grew up and away from one another, long festering secret threatens to rip the trio apart. I've decided that you need to have no secrets in your teens because they come back to haunt you. Are you seeing that? When early marriages, relationships that didn't work, it's all going to come back to haunt you. Let's do some historical fiction with that in mind, haunting you back. First of all, we've got The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis, a New York Times bestseller. I had the pleasure of talking to her. It's a Bookreporter Bets on selection, and it's been on sale for a couple of weeks. We start out in Egypt in 1936, where an anthropology student, Charlotte Cross, is offered and accepts a coveted spot on an archaeological dig in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. But then an unbearable tragedy strikes. Now let's flash forward to New York in 1978, where 19-year-old Annie Jenkins gets the opportunity to work for former Vogue fashion editor Deanna Rayland, who is in the midst of organizing the famous Met Gala. Meanwhile, Charlotte is now leading a quiet life as the associate curator of the Met's celebrated Department of Egyptian Art. She's consumed by her research on Harthacori, a rare female pharaoh dismissed by most other Egyptologists as unimportant. On the night of the gala, one of the Egyptian art collection's most valuable artifacts goes missing, and there's signs that Hathakori legendary curse might be reawakening. Annie and Charlotte team up to search for the missing antiquity. Just a great book. I have loved all of her books. This is the eighth book that Fiona has written that is set in an iconic building in New York here at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I still think this is her best. So those who have loved her before, I'll be anxious to hear what you say. Next, we've got Hold Strong, and it is by Robert Dugoni and Jeff Langholz and Chris Crabtree. It's coming on January 28th. Sam Carlson is a projectionist in a small Minnesota town, Minnesota, where fantasies unspool in glorious black and white for him and for his sweetheart, college-bound math whiz Sarah Haber. When the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, Sam is sent to the Philippines, is captured as a POW. Brutalized but unbroken by the Bataan Death March and the POW camps, he's one of 1,800 starved and weakened prisoners herded into the cargo hold of a barbaric hell ship called the Arizin Maru. His survival is doubtful. Determined to use her math skills on the home front, Sarah is recruited to Washington, D.C., to the covert field of code breaking. And now the lives of the two young lovers are about to be inadvertently collide in one of the most shocking acts of World War II. Robert Dugoni, you know for a lot of his fiction, also The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, him writing with two other authors right now. Very interesting, and once again, navigating a time in history that we're still unfolding so much about. Next, we've got Harlem Rhapsody, and this is from Victoria Christopher Murray. You know her as one of the writers of The Personal Librarian, coming on February 4th. 1919 high school teacher Jessie Redmond Fawcett has been named the literary editor of The Crisis, the first Black woman to hold this position in a preeminent Negro magazine. Jessie is poised to achieve literary greatness, but she holds a secret that jeopardizes it all. W.E.B. Du Bois, the founder of The Crisis, is not only Jessie's boss, he's her lover. And neither his wife nor their 14-year-old age difference can keep the two apart. Amidst rumors of their tumultuous affair, Jessie is determined to prove herself. She attacks the challenge of discovering young writers with fervor. Under her leadership, The Crisis thrives. When her first novel is released to great acclaim, it's clear that Jessie is at the heart of a renaissance in Black music, theater, and the arts. But as she strives to preserve her legacy, she'll discover the high cost of her unparalleled success. Next, we've got Isola from Allegra Goodman. This is also one of our winter reading selections, and it was one of the book group speed dating picks. I had the pleasure of hearing Allegra talk about this book in a pre-pub conversation. Heir to a fortune, Marguerite is destined for a life of prosperity and gentility. And then she's orphaned, and her guardian, an enigmatic and volatile man, spends her inheritance and insists she accompany him on an expedition to New France. Isolated and afraid, Marguerite befriends her guardian's servant, and the two develop an intense attraction. But then the relationship is discovered, they are brutally punished and abandoned on a small island with no hope of rescue. Once a child of privilege who dressed in gowns and laced pearls in her hair, Marguerite finds herself at the mercy of nature. As the weather turns, blanketing the island in ice, she discovers a faith she never before needed. It's interesting. Allegra actually started thinking about this story 16 years ago when they were on a vacation, and she picked up a book and started reading about this time period and what had happened on this island. So there's a really long background to this story. Next, from Pangenoff, we've got Last Twilight in Paris, which is coming on February 4th. London in 1953, Louise is still adjusting to her post-war role as a housewife when she discovers a necklace in a box at a second-hand shop. The box is marked with the name of a department store in Paris. She's certain she's seen the necklace before. when she worked with the Red Cross in Nazi-occupied Europe, and that it holds the key to the mysterious death of her friend Franny during the war. Following a trail of clues to Paris, Louise seeks help from her former boss Ian, with whom she shares a romantic history. She races to find the connection between the necklace, the department store, and Franny's death. But nothing is as it seems, and there are forces determined to keep the truth buried forever. So there you've got Last Twilight in Paris. Next, we've got Mutual Interest by Olivia Wolfgang Smith, also coming on February 4th. When Vivian Lesperance meets Oscar Schmidt, a middle manager at a soap company at the turn of the 20th century, she finds a partner she can guide to build the life she wants. Not least because more interested in men himself, Oscar will leave Vivian to tend her own romances with women. But Vivian's plans require capital, so the two pair up with Squire Clancy, scion of an old American fortune. Together they found Clancy and Schmidt, a preeminent manufacturer of soap, perfume, and candles. When Oscar and Squire fall in love, the trio form a new partnership. Vivian reaches the pinnacle of her power, building Clancy and Schmidt into an empire of personal care products while operating behind the image of both men. But exposure threatens, and all three partners are made aware of how much they have to lose. So there we've got Mutual Interest. Next, we've got The Boxcar Librarian, which is coming on March 4th as a paperback original, and it's by Brianna Labuschagne. When Work Progress Administration editor Millie Wang finds herself on the wrong end of a potential political scandal, she's shipped off to Montana to work on the state's American Guide series, travel books intended to put the nation's destitute writers to work. Millie arrives to an eclectic staff claiming their missed deadlines are due to sabotage, possibly from the state's powerful Copper Kings, who don't want their long and bloody history with union organizers aired for the rest of the country to read. More than a decade earlier, Alice Munro created Boxcar Library in order to deliver books to the isolated mining towns. She thought she found the perfect librarian to staff the train car in Colette Durand, a miner's daughter with a shotgun and too many secrets behind her eyes. But no one in Missoula will tell Millie why both Alice and Colette went out on the inaugural journey of the Boxcar Library, but only Alice returned. So there you go. And this is by the author of The Librarian of Burned Books. Next, we've got The Girl from Greenwich Street by Lauren Willig, also on sale on March 4th. Just before Christmas 1799, Elma Sands slips out of her Quaker cousin's boarding house and doesn't come home. Her body is eventually found in the Manhattan well. Handbills circulate around the city, accusing a carpenter named Levi Weeks of seducing and murdering Elma, but privately, quietly. Levi's wealthy brother calls in a special favor. Aaron Burr's legal practice can't finance both his expensive tastes and his ambition to win the 1800 New York elections. Defend Levi Weeks is a double win, a hefty fee, plus a chance to grab headlines. Alexander Hamilton has his own political aspirations. He isn't going to let Burr monopolize the public's attention. If Burr is defending Levi Weeks, then Hamilton will too. And as the trial and election draw near, Burr and Hamilton race against time to save a man's life and destroy each other. So there you've got The Girl from Greenwich Street. Next, from Georgia Hunter, the author of We Were the Lucky Ones, we've got One Good Thing coming also on March 4th. 1940, Amelia Romanga, Lily, and Esty have been best friends since meeting at the University of Ferrara. There's a war being fought across borders, and in Italy, Mussolini's racial laws have deemed Lily and Esty descendants of the inferior Jewish race. But life somehow goes on until Germany invades northern Italy, and the friends find themselves in occupied territory. Esty convinces Lily to flee first to a villa in the countryside to help hide a group of young war orphans, then to a convent in France, where they pose as nuns and forge false identification papers for the underground. When disaster strikes the convent, a critically wounded Esty asks Lily to take a much bigger step, to go on the run with Esty's son Theo. Terrified to travel on her own, Lily sets out on an epic journey south towards the Allied territory through Nazi-occupied villages and bombed-out cities, doing everything she can to keep Theo safe. So there's one good thing. The Antidote by Karen Russell comes on March 11th. It opens on a Black Sunday. The historic dust storm ravages the fictional town of Uz, Nebraska. But Uz is already collapsing, not just under the weight of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl drought, but beneath its own violent histories. Karen Russell's novel follows a prairie witch whose body serves as a bank vault for people's memories and secrets. A Polish wheat farmer who learns how quickly a hoarded blessing can become a curse. His orphan niece, a basketball star, and witch's apprentice in furious flight from her grief. A voluble scarecrow and a New Deal photographer whose time traveling camera threatens to reveal both the town's secrets and its fate. So there we've got coming on March 11th. Next, we've got A Map to Paradise by Susan Meisner, which is coming on March 18th. With her name on the Hollywood blacklist and her life on hold, starlet Melanie Cole has little choice in company. There's her next door neighbor, Elwood, but the screenwriter's agoraphobia allows for just short chats through open windows. He's her sole confidant, though, as she and her housekeeper, Eva, an immigrant from war-torn Europe, rarely make conversation. Then early one morning, Melanie and Eva spot Elwood's sister-in-law and caretaker, June, digging in his beloved rose garden. If they don't see Elwood at all anymore, they start to wonder, where could a man who never leaves the house possibly have gone? They try to find out if something has happened to him. Unexpected secrets are revealed about all three women, leading to an alliance that seems the only way for any of them to hold up what they can still call their own. But it's a fragile pact, and one little spark could send it all up in smoke. So we've got A Map to Paradise. Next, we've got The Paris Express coming from Emma Donoghue on March 18th. And you probably remember her as the author of Room. This is based on an 1895 disaster that went down in history when it was captured in a series of surreal, extraordinary photographs. The Paris Express is set on a train packed with a fascinating cast of characters who hail from as close as Brittany and as far as Russia, Ireland, Algeria, Pennsylvania, and Cambodia. Members of parliament hurry back to Paris to vote. A medical student suspects a girl may be dying. A secretary tries to convince her boss of the potential of moving pictures. Two of the train's crew build a life away from their wives. A young anarchist makes a terrifying plan, and much more. So there you've got The Paris Express. Next, we've got The Story She Left Behind by Patty Callahan Henry, coming on March 18th. 1927, 8-year-old Clara Harrington's magical childhood shatters when her mother, renowned author Bronwyn Newcastle Fordham, disappears off the coast of South Carolina. Bronwyn stunned the world with a book written with an invented language that became a national sensation when she was just 12 years old. Her departure leaves behind not only a devoted husband and a heartbroken daughter, but also the hope of ever translating the sequel to her landmark work. By 1952, Clara is an illustrator raising her own daughter, Winnie. And one day, a stranger named Charlie Jameson contacts her from London, claiming to have discovered a handwritten dictionary of her mother's lost language. Compelled by the tragedy of her mother's vanishing, Clara crosses the Atlantic with Winnie. The Jameson family retreat nestled in Lake District. Clara must find the courage to uncover the truth about her mother and the story that she left behind. Next, we've got some thrillers and mysteries because we know our audience loves them. We're going to start out with Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney that just today we found out hit the New York Times list. It's a Bookreporter bets on selection. I wrote about it last week on why I love this, and it is one of our winter reading selections. Author Grady Green is having the worst best day of his life. Grady calls his wife to share some exciting news as she's driving home. Here's Abby slam on the brakes, get out of the car, and then nothing. When eventually he finds her car by the cliff edge, the headlights are on, the driver door is open, her phone is still there, but his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady's still overcome with grief and desperate to know what happened to Abby. He can't sleep and he can't write, so he travels to a tiny Scottish island to try to get his life back on track. And then he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. So there you've got Beautiful Ugly. Next, we've got The Business Trip, which is one of our winter reading selections this week. It was one of the winter reading contests this week, and it's by Jessie Garcia. Stephanie and Jasmine have nothing and everything in common. Two women don't know each other, but are on the same plane. Stephanie's on a business trip, and Jasmine is fleeing an abusive relationship. After a few days, they text their friends the same exact messages about the same man, and the messages become stranger and more erratic. And then the two women vanish. The texts go silent. The red flags go up. The panic sets in. When Stephanie and Jasmine are each declared missing and in danger, it begs the question, who's Trent McCarthy? What did he do to these women? Or what did they do to him? So we've got Shockingly Clever from Lisa Gardner, and it certainly sounds like it is. Next, we've got the note from Alafair Burke, which is one of my book reporter bets on selections. Growing up, May Hanover was always a good girl. Raised by a first-generation Chinese single mother with high expectations, she didn't have room to slip up, let alone fail. But even good girls have secrets and regrets. And when it comes to her friendship with Lauren and Kelsey, she had a fair share of both. Their bond, forged when May was just 12 years old, has withstood a tragic accident, individual scandals, heartbreak, and loss. And now the three of them have reunited for the first time in years for a few days of sun and fun in the Hamptons. But a chance encounter with a pair of strangers leads to a drunken prank that goes horribly awry. When she finds herself at the center of an urgent police investigation, May becomes to wonder if Lauren and Kelsey are keeping secrets from her, testing the limits of her loyalty to lifelong friends. And the note is something that is left on the car of someone who cheats them out of a parking spot. And I just love how that one little twist there of somebody cheating at a parking spot sends a book in a whole direction. And it's actually something that happened to Alice Fair and a couple of girlfriends when they were out in the Hamptons. And it just stuck with her of what if this note was stuck in her car? What would it mean? What would happen from there? Next, from Scott Turow, we've got Presumed Guilty. It's one of our winter reading contest selections. I am going to be interviewing Scott next week, and I am reading this book right now and loving it. Rusty, remember Rusty from Presumed Innocent? Well, Rusty's a retired judge attempting a third act in life with a loving soon-to-be wife, Bee. But the peace that's taken Rusty so long to find evaporates when Bee's young adult son, Aaron, living under their supervision while on probation for drug possession, disappears. If Aaron doesn't return soon, he'll be sent back to jail. Aaron eventually turns up with a vague story about a camping trip with his troubled girlfriend, May, that ended in a fight and a long hitchhike home. Days later, when May still hasn't returned, suspicion falls on Aaron, and when May is subsequently discovered dead, Aaron's arrested and set for trial on charges of first-degree murder. Faced with few choices and fewer hopes, Bee begs Rusty to return to court one last time to defend her son and to save their best last hope for happiness. So well done. I'm a little more than halfway through, and I just want to just sit there and tear through the rest of it. But Scott's writing is so detailed. I'm in the courtroom. I'm feeling exactly what's going on with these people. Extremely well done. Also, just became a New York Times bestseller. Next, we've got The Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which is a #1 indie next pick. It's on sale now, and this also hit the Times list this week. They call them wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast, and they're sent to Wellwood House in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, give them up for adoption, and forget any of it ever happened. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970. She's pregnant, terrified, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. Everything they eat, every moment of their waking day, and everything they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by adults who claim they want to know what's best for them. Then Fen meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft and powers in the hand of the girls for the first time in their lives. But the power can destroy as easily as it creates, and it's never given freely. So there you go, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Next, we've got The Oligarch's Daughter by Joseph Finder. Many of you are familiar with his writing. This is on sale on January 28th. Paul Brightman is a man on the run, living under an assumed name in a small New England town with $1 million bounty on his head. When a security is breached, Paul is forced to flee into the New Hampshire wilderness to evade Russian operatives who can seemingly predict his every move. 6 years ago, Paul was a rising star on Wall Street who fell in love with a beautiful photographer named Tatiana, unaware that her father was a Russian oligarch and the object of considerable interest from several U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, to save his own life, Paul must unravel a decades-old conspiracy that extends to the highest reaches of the government. So there you go, the oligarch's daughter. Next, we've got trust issues, and this is coming from Elizabeth McCullough Keenan and Greg Wands. Greg Wands is the partner of Fiona Davis, and there was a fabulous feature on the two of them in People magazine about how they came together. He's met her at an event, and how it was really orchestrated by their publicist and her publicist, and it was a lot of fun to read that story as backstory on Greg and Fiona's relationship. So here we've got siblings Hazel and Kagan Bailey haven't been close in a long time. But when their mother passes under mysterious circumstances, an investigation quickly follows. And the siblings are high on the list of possible suspects. As they deal with the emotional tragedy of losing their only living parent, brother and sister are forced to team up against a master con man, someone they once called family. After the silver-tongued trickster disappears with the family fortune, Hazel and Kagan must put aside their differences to track him down. Along the way, they encounter a host of secrets, lies, and double crosses as they dive into the murky waters of their family's past. With an unlikely ally by their side, the siblings race against time, unraveling a web of deceit that's even more tangled than they ever would have imagined. Next, from Yo Nesbo, we've got Blood Ties coming on February 11th. By all accounts, Carl and Roy Opgard are doing quite well for themselves, or at least they're doing as well anybody can expect in a small town like Oz. Carl manages the area's swanky and successful spa and hotel, while Roy runs a nearby gas station and harbors grand plans to build it out into an entire amusement park, complete with a roller coaster. When news breaks about a new highway to be built nearby, bypassing their town and leaving the town cut off and isolated, it's clear that something has to be done, even if the methods are bound to be dirty. Fortunately, Carl and Roy have experience in just that kind of work. Meanwhile, the town sheriff has gotten his hands on new technology that will enable him to take a deeper look at a slate of unsolved murders from years past, including that of his own father. So there you've got Blood Ties. Next up from Greg Hurwitz, we've got a new Orphan X novel. Everybody knows that I'm just a little bit in love with Evan Smoke. My husband knows it's okay. Evan Smoke was once a highly successful black ops assassin known as Orphan X, dedicated to a rigid set of operational rules. Even after going deep underground and remaking his life, Evan remains dedicated to his unbreakable code. For the first time in his life, those principles have put him on a collision course with the man who might be his best friend in the world, Tommy Stojak. Tommy, a gifted gunsmith who has created much of Evan's own weapons and combat gear, has apparently crossed one of Evan's sharply delineated lines. When Evan decides to have it out with Tommy, Evan is ambushed by a skilled crew of killers determined to take him down on their own. But Evan's hard to kill, and the dispute explodes into open warfare between Evan and Tommy, and now Evan has no choice but to track him down and face his only friend. Next, from Marie Benedict, we've got The Queens of Crime coming on February 11th. In London, 1930, five greatest women crime writers have banded together to form a secret society with a single goal: to show that they are no longer willing to be treated as second-class citizens by their male counterparts in the legendary Detection Club. Led by the formidable Dorothy L. Sayers, the group includes Agatha Christie, Iago Marsh, Marjorie Allingham, and Baroness Emma Crossy. They call themselves the Queens of Crime. Their plan? Solve an actual murder, that of a young woman found strangled in a park in France, who may have connections leading to the highest levels of British establishment. As they embark on their own investigation, the Queens of Crime discover they're stronger together. But soon the killer targets Dorothy Sayers herself, threatening to expose a dark secret in her past that she would do anything to keep hidden. Queens of Crime by Marie Benedict. I'm really excited. I'm going to actually be interviewing Marie when she's down in Brielle at the Brielle Library. on February 10th. So I'm looking forward to that evening. Next, we've got close your eyes and count to 10. How many times have we said that? Close your eyes and count to 10. How many times have we told little children that? Charismatic daredevil and extreme adventurer Maverick Dillon invite you to the ultimate game of hide and seek. But as the players gather on Falcao Island, the event quickly spirals into a chilling test of survival. A storm rages as a deadly threat stalks the contestants, turning the challenge into something far more sinister than the social media stunt it was intended to be. Enter Adele, a single mother with a fierce determination to protect her children at all costs. She begins the game, she unwittingly enters a twisted web of deception and intrigue. Can she maneuver through the treacherous storm and the relentless competition and get home to her family? In a ruthless battle for survival where the stakes are higher than ever, the blurry line between the virtual and the real proves that only one person we can trust is ourselves. There's close your eyes and count to 10. Next, from Sandra Brown, we've got Blood Moon. Sandra usually publishes in August. So, for those of you who are used to seeing her books come out in August, she's moved to March this year, March 4th to be specific. Detective Joan Bowie was one misstep away from being fired from the Eau Claire Police Department in coastal Louisiana. Recently divorced and slightly heavy-handed with his liquor, Bowie does all that he can to cope with the actions taken or not taken during the investigation of Christy Mellon, a teenage girl who disappeared more than 3 years prior. Now, Crisis Point, a long-running true crime television series, soon to air an episode documenting the unsolved crime. Beth Collins, a senior producer on Crisis Point, is convinced that Chrissy's disappearance was not an isolated incident. A string of disappearances of teenage girls in nearby areas has only one thing in common. They took place on the night of a blood moon. In a last-ditch effort to find out the truth, Beth leaves New York City for Louisiana to enlist Detective Bowie to help her figure out what happened to Chrissy and find the true culprit before he acts again on the next blood moon in 4 days' time. So 4 days to track this down. I love the books where the clock is ticking. Next, we've got Count My Lies coming from Sophie Stava. Sloane Caraway is a liar. Harmless lies, mostly to make her self-proclaimed sad little life a little bit more interesting. So Sloane sees a young girl in tears at a park one afternoon. She can't help herself. She tells the girl's very attractive dad she's a nurse and helps him pull a bee stinger from the girl's foot. Sly and chance encounter, Sloane becomes the nanny for the wealthy and privileged Jay and Violet Lockhart. Perfect New York couple with a brownstone, a daughter in private school, summers on Brock Island. Maybe Sloane isn't the only one that's lying, and all that's picture perfect harbors a much more dangerous truth. So count my lies. And Leah Moriarty calls this a real page turner. Next, from El Casamano, we've got Finley Donovan digs her own grave. Finley Donovan is this really fun character, and her nanny partner in crime, Vero, have not always gotten along with Finley's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Haggerty, the community busybody and president of the neighborhood watch. But when a dead body is discovered in her backyard, Mrs. Haggerty needs their help. First, a suspect, Miss Haggerty, is cleared by the police, but her house remains an active crime scene. She's got nowhere to go, except Finley's house, right across the street. Finley and Vera have no interest in getting involved in another murder case or sacrificing one of their bedrooms. But when the focus of the investigation widens to include Finley's ex-husband, Stephen, Finley and Vera are left with little choice but to get closer to Mrs. Haggerty and uncover her secrets before the police start digging up theirs. But who's going to solve the mystery first? I personally am putting my money on Finley and Vera. So there you go. Next, from Chris Bajelian, we've got The Jackal's Mistress, which is coming on March 11th. Virginia, 1864. Libby Stedman's husband has been away for so long she can barely conjure his voice in her dreams. She longs for him in the night, fearing him dead in a Union prison camp. Her days are spent running a gristmill with her teenage niece, a hired hand, and his wife. It's an uneasy life in the Shenandoah Valley, and Libby awakens every morning expecting to see her land a battlefield. Then she finds a gravely injured Union officer left for dead in a neighbor's house. Captain Jonathan Weybridge is of the Vermont Brigade is her enemy, but he's also a human being, and Libby must make a terrible decision. Does she leave him there to die alone, or does she risk treason and nurse him back to health? And if she succeeds, does she try to secretly bring him across Union lines, or she might negotiate a trade for news of her husband? So there we've got the Jackal's Mistress. Next, we've got the summer guest from Des Gerritsen. As you probably remember that she's got her new character is a former spy, Maggie Bird, who's retired to the seaside hamlet of Purity, Maine. And she settled for a quiet life with breathtaking views, but enemies from her past soon threaten to destroy everything. Maggie survived thanks to her wits and the collective intelligence of a martini club, the circle of ex-CIA friends in her cocktail-sipping book club. Their handiwork, however, caught the attention of a young police officer, Joe. And now Joe and her neighborhood ex-spies have an uneasy alliance. The first book was terrific, folks. If you didn't read that one, be sure to pick it up. After a teenager vanishes and Maggie's neighbor becomes the prime suspect, she joins the investigation, determined to prove her friend's innocence. But the girl's wealthy family pushes for an arrest, and when authorities discover a long dead corpse in a nearby pond, the case becomes doubly complicated, with the unthinkable ties to long buried secrets. I love the way Tess realized that there were a number of people in her neighborhood in Maine that were ex-CIA, and that's where she came up with the idea of this new series that she's writing, and it's just so good. I love reading about these people and their Martini Club book club. Next, we've got some memoirs, biographies, and other nonfiction. I'm going to start with Brooke Shields is Not Allowed to Get Old. It's written by Brooke Shields with Rachel Birchey. It is on sale now. It actually became a bestseller when it came on sale last week, and now is a bestseller. Brooke Shields has spent a lifetime in the public eye, growing up as a child actor and model. Her every feature was scrutinized, her every decision judged. Today, Brooke faces a different kind of scrutiny of being a woman of a certain age. And yet, for Brooke, the passage of time has brought freedom. At 59, she feels more comfortable in her skin, more empowered and confident than she did decades ago in those famous Calvin Kleins. Now, when Brooke Shields is Not Allowed to Get Old, she's changing the narrative about women and aging. With remarkable candor, Brooke bears it all, painting a vibrant and optimistic picture of being a woman in the prime of her life while dismantling the myths that have dimmed that perception for far too long. Next, we've got Hope by Pope Francis, which is an autobiography. And it's the first autobiography in history to be published by a pope. Written over 6 years, and a complete autobiography starts in the early years of the 20th century with Pope Francis's Italian roots and his ancestors' courageous migration to Latin America, continuing through his childhood, the enthusiasms, preoccupations of his youth, his vocation, his adult life, and the whole of his papacy up to the present day. Recounting his memories with intimate narrative force, not forgetting his own personal passions, Pope Francis deals unsparingly with some of the crucial moments of his papacy and writes candidly, fearlessly, and prophetically about some of the most important and controversial questions of our present time. Next, we've got the JFK Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill Kennedy and Why It Failed by Brad Meltzer and Josh Mensch. This is also out now. John F. Kennedy, we all know the 35th president of the United States, is often ranked among Americans' most well-liked presidents. Yet what most Americans don't know is that his historic presidency almost ended before it began at the hands of a disgruntled sociopathic loner armed with dynamite. December 11th, 1960, shortly after Kennedy's election and before his inauguration, retired postal worker named Richard Pavlik waited in his car on a quiet street in Palm Beach, Florida. He knew the president-elect's schedule. He knew when Kennedy would leave his house. He knew where Kennedy was going. And from there, he had a simple plan, one that could have changed the course of history. Next, we've got Save Our Souls by Matthew Pearl, which is also on sale now. December 10th, 1887, a shark fishing boat disappeared. On board the doomed vessel were the Walkers, the ship's captain Frederick, his wife Elizabeth, their 3 teenage sons, and their dog, along with the ship crew. The family had spotted a promising fishing location when a terrible storm arose, splitting their vessel in two and leaving those on board adrift on the perilous sea. When the castaways awoke the next morning, they discovered they'd been washed ashore on an island inhabited by a large but ragged and emaciated man who introduced himself as Hans. It turned out that Hans had a secret, and as the Walker family gradually came to learn more, what seemed like a stroke of luck to have the mystery man's assistance became something ominous and something darker. So there we've got the Save Our Souls. Next, we've got Three Wild Dogs and the Truth by Marcus Zuzak, also out this week. What happens when the Zuzak family opens their home to three big, wild, street-hardened dogs? Reuben, more wolf than hound, Archer, blonde, beautiful, and destructive, and rancorously smiling Frosty, who walks like a rolling thunderstorm. The answer can only be chaos. There's street fights, park fights, public shamings, property damages, injuries, hospital visits, wellness checks, pure comedy, shocking tragedy, and carnage that must be read to be believed. There's a reckoning of the shortcomings and failure, a strengthening of will, but most important of all, an explosion of love and the joy and recognition of family. And you know Marcus as the New York Times bestselling author of The Book Thief. Picture those dogs in business with each other. Next, we've got Cleavage by Jennifer Finney Boylan, which is coming on February 4th. Jennifer Finney Boylan, She's Not There, was the best-selling work written by a transgender, was the first best-selling work written by a transgender American. And since its publication 20 years ago, she's become the go-to person for insight into the impact of gender on our lives. But Cleavage is more than a deep dive into gender identity. It's also a look at the difference between coming out as trans in 2000, when many people reacted to Boylan's transition with love, and the present era of blowback and fear. How does gender affect our sense of self, our body image, the passage of time, the friends we lose and keep? Boylan considers her womanhood, reflects on the boys and men who shaped her, and reconceives of herself as a writer, activist, parent, and spouse. So there we've got Cleavage. Next, we've got Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks coming on February 4th. Many cultural and religious traditions expect those who are grieving to step away from the world. In contemporary life, we are often met with red tape and to-do lists. And that's exactly what happens to Geraldine Brooks when her partner of more than 3 decades, Tony Horwitz, collapsed and died on a Washington, D.C. sidewalk. After spending their early years in conflict zones as foreign correspondents, Geraldine and Tony settled down to raise 2 boys on Martha's Vineyard. Their happy life ended abruptly when on Memorial Day 2019, Geraldine received the phone call we all dread. 3 years later, she booked a flight to a remote island off the coast of Australia with the intention of finally giving herself time to mourn. In a shack on a pristine, rugged coast, she often went days without seeing another person, and there she pondered the various ways in which cultures grieve and what rituals of her own might help rebuild a life around the void of Tony's death. And that's Memorial Days. And you know her as the best-selling author of Horse. Next, we've got Seeking Shelter from Jeff Hobbs, also coming on February 4th. And I've always enjoyed Jeff Hobbs' work. He's the best-selling author of The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace. And I interviewed him years ago when that book first came out. So what have we got in this book? 2018, poverty and domestic violence cast Evelyn and her children into the urban wilderness of Los Angeles, where she avoids family crisis network that offers no clear pathway for her children to remain together in a decent school. For the next 5 years, she works full-time as a waitress, yet remains unstable to afford legitimate housing or qualify for government aid. All the while, she strives to provide stability, education, loving memories, college aspirations for her children, even while they sleep in motels in her car, living in fear of both her ex and the nation's largest child welfare agency. Eventually, Evelyn encounters Wendy Gaines, a recently trained social worker who decades earlier survived her own abusive marriage and housing crisis. Evelyn becomes one of Wendy's first clients, and the relationship transforms them both. I'm so looking forward to reading this book. Next, we've got Who I Always Was by Teresa Okokon, which is coming on February 4th. When Teresa was 9, her father traveled to his hometown in Nigeria to attend his mother's funeral and never returned. His mysterious death shattered Teresa as her family's world unraveled. And now, a storyteller and television co-host, she sets out to explore the ripple of effects that profound loss and the way heartache shapes our sense of self and the world for the rest of our lives. Using her grief and her father's death as a backdrop, she delves deeply into the intrinsic themes of Blackness, American spirituality, family, abandonment, belonging, the seemingly endless, unrequited romantic pursuits of a Black woman who came of age as a Black girl in the Wisconsin suburbs where she, in many ways, was always an anomaly. So there we've got Who I Always Was. Next, we've got Propaganda Girls, The Secret War of the Secret War of the Women in the OSS by Lisa Rogak. Bethy McDonald was 28-year-old reporter from Hawaii. Zuka Lawlers was growing up in a tiny Czechoslovakian village and knew 5 languages by the time she was 21. Jane Smith Hutton was the wife of a naval attaché living in Tokyo. Marlene Dietrich, the German-American actress and singer, was one of the biggest stars of the 20th century. These 4 women, each fascinating in their own right, together contributed to one of the most covert and successful military campaigns in World War II. As members of the OSS, their task was to create a secret band of propaganda produced with the sole aim of breaking the morale of Axis soldiers. Working in European theater across enemy lines in occupied China and in Washington, D.C., the women forged letters and official military orders, wrote and produced entire newspapers, scripted radio broadcasts and song, and even developed rumors for undercover spies and double agents to spread to the enemy. And outside of a small group of spies, no one knew they existed until now. That concludes the presentation of 60. Yes, 60 books. It took me a little more than an hour. I'm sorry I went a little bit long, but I went as quickly as I could. These are 2 of the most recent Book Reporter Talks to video podcasts that we've got. We're either on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we've got more than 200 there right now for you to enjoy, with many more to come. Also, we've got our winter reading contest that I talked about. Our next winter reading contest will go up next Tuesday, and once again, the prize will be available for 24 hours. So it goes up on the 28th of January, and it'll be available for 24 hours. And this is this year's featured titles. You've heard about them today, and you can see why we're excited about them. Also, we've got a word of mouth contest running right now. And in this contest, you tell us what you've read. All you have to do is go out and tell us what you're reading right now and what you think about it. And you can be entered to win these 2 titles. Both of them are bets on selections. I'm telling you, you will enjoy them both. So jump out onto Book Reporter, onto our word of mouth area, write in what you're reading and what you think about it, and you can be eligible to win both titles. Simple as that. Also, you can share your favorite books of 2024. You can enter to win 7 great 2025 book group titles on readinggroupguides.com. What you want to be able to do is go in by the 29th, next Wednesday, the 29th at noon Eastern Time, and tell us what your favorite book of last year was and the favorite book that you read with your book club. That's all you got to do. 2 titles. And you can be entered to win these books. So we're hoping to put together a collection of what our book group readers really felt was the best book they read with their book club last year, and also the book that they read on their own. We're going to have a next our Bookaccino Live, our first one of this year, with Ashley Elliston, who's going to discuss First Lie Wins, which is a Reese's Book Club pick. It's already being adapted into a film, and a Book Reporter bets on selection. I love this book. Ashley is just fabulous to talk to. And this was a runaway success. It sold 1 million copies by August last year, and no one really saw this coming, except for the fact that it's just a twisty thriller and it's so much fun to read. And you have till January 29th to read it. You've got like a week from tonight, and trust me, you can do it. Book is that brisk and it's that much fun, and Ashley's just so much fun to talk to. So you want to get reading and get ready for this book club next week. And then the following month, on February 26th at 8 o'clock, Lisa Wingate is going to be joining us to discuss Shelterwood, which is a Book Reporter bets on selection from last year that's coming out in paperback on February 18th. So we look forward to having you join us for that event as well. And our next Bookaccino Live book group afternoon event, for all those who can sneak away in the afternoon, it's going to preview of books coming out February 11th, March 4th, and a peek ahead at April. We're going to expand upon some of the titles that we talked about tonight, bring you something more in depth, and then look ahead at April as well. So that is going to be on Wednesday, February 12th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And sign up for that is available on Book Reporter and Reading Group Guys right now, and will also be on the follow-up materials we send so that you can take a look at those as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you very much for being a part of today. And I'm going to hit pause here for a second. And I am going to, oh, that's not what I want to do. I want to resume that. 1 second. I'm going to pause recording. So here's to some great winter reading. Stay tuned for our spring preview event that will happen on March 19th. Tom, remember, he said we have to go to Tuesday, March 18th before we can start looking at spring books. And so on March 19th, Wednesday, March 19th, we will be planning to do our spring preview. And sign up is available at tbrnetwork.com/events, where you can always get a look at all the events that we've got coming up. Thank you so much for joining us together tonight. You've been a great audience, and we really appreciate your taking the time to be with us. Happy reading, everyone.